You want to read the statement?
Sure.
Okay.
Well,
I'll read it from here.
oh, okay, you read it.
So we'll start out with the land acknowledgement and anti-oppression statement. At PPS, we strive to strengthen our relationships with the Native community and Native nations. A symbol of this commitment is a land acknowledgement. These statements bring visibility to the first peoples of our collective home. This statement is meant to provide information and context while also encouraging all to reflect on our current day relationship with Native people and Native experiences. We acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional land of the Chinook, Clackamas, Kalapuya, Multnomah, Wasco, Cathlamet, Tualatin, Malala. We also know that many other tribes made their home along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. We honor their history and acknowledge the sacrifices they made. Let us also acknowledge the robust present-day federally recognized tribes of this area, the Grand Ronde, Siletz, and Cowlitz. In addition, I would like to acknowledge the Chinook Nation, who has been seeking federal recognition for many years. The urban Indian community is made up of tribal diversity that originates from around the country, representing 400 tribes. The urban Indian community has a vivid history made up of people whose journeys have brought them to Portland by ways of forced displacement or seeking more opportunities. Today, these tribes and communities celebrate their heritage, showing resilience and tenacity that would be greatly admired by their ancestors. Within Portland Public Schools today, we serve students and families representing more than 150 tribal nations within our education system. It is our obligation to teach accurate information, past and present, about the impact of colonization on our students, all students today, and make visible the multitude of Native families and many diverse ways Native communities and families are living in the present. We encourage every person to reflect on their own history, understand the history of colonization and genocide, and support Indigenous sovereignty, priorities, and actions. This acknowledgement is one step that we can take to improve our support of Indigenous communities in the area. In addition to acknowledging the land and those that have been here since time began, we must also remember our stolen siblings from Africa, whose labor built the vast wealth of this country. These two communities and the atrocities committed against them are intrinsically intertwined due to our existence within a white supremacist world. Everything we have is due to stolen land and stolen labor, and every system and institution that impacts our lives is built upon this legacy. It is our job to speak that truth into spaces so that we can begin to heal. Again, you've already done the welcome. I won't go through that. We're going to kind of go through a process of talking about, I think, what you've seen in the presentation, which is some of the learnings from CPC 3.1 and 3.2. Actually, I'll let Judy, if you want to go through.
Yeah, so we I think everybody's coming back, but what we want to cover today, we changed up a little bit because of feedback that we got last time. So the tour was a reflection of that. And apologies that that's taking a little bit a life of its own, but I think it would be a welcome for the committee to kind of hear and see the school. So, and then we'll cover, hopefully you guys got a chance to see the preview to what we're going to show today, and read some of the text, because there were a lot of text. I wanted to reflect all the things we've heard in surveys and the last committee. So welcome back, take a seat. Everybody's coming back. So, hey, for people that are online, I want to especially to point out, you can text your questions in during the meeting, and please, we will try to answer them as best we can. If they don't get answered during the meeting, we will respond to them, and they'll be posted on the BOM website. So you can also go see all of the questions that are on that website. Yeah, everybody kind of come back and take a seat. Okay, so this is really a summary of what happened last time. We did have 2 sessions, so you might have only gone to one of them. And so I wanted to kind of just put out what collectively between the 2 meetings, what came sort of out of them. And so you guys remember the exercise that we did. We, I think culture and heritage ranked very high on almost all of the 9 groups that happened between the 2 sessions. And so this is something that we want to cover today and spend some time on today. And then the question about the space program, we realize that a lot of you still have questions about what goes in this future school. What does that mean? What are all the parts and pieces? So we also share that out as a preview, so that you can dig into it a little bit, and we'll try to cover that at the second half of this meeting. And then I'm not going to go through all of this, but I'm hoping that you guys had a chance to read we did send out a survey at the end, and there was people really, specifically were asked to rank the different impacts and to culture and heritage, as well as the disruption. So, the new full replacement options were the biggest impact to culture and heritage. And then the third one is the least. And then on the least disruption versus more disruption, the first full replacement to the north was actually ranked less disruptive overall, even though I think everybody recognized that it's a disruption to the athletics. And then there were more potential disruption overall because the school would have to be renovated, where kids go, that kind of thing. That came through. I am going to share this document also afterwards. So if you didn't get a chance to read it, these are the comments that we got either during the actual meetings, the 2 meetings, or online. And I bold some of them, and I'm going to go through maybe quickly without reading all of them. But maintaining the structure of the building really sort of was a key component to many comments about how we can keep the memories and the history of the school. So it's the spirit of the place that matters. So how do we create that spirit in the future? That came through loud and clear. A lot of people ask, like, how are we defining culture and heritage, right? It's the abstract term. Maybe all of us have a different view of that. So that is why, seeing all these comments, we focused our topics today on that topic. And we have some exercise to help draw out what we all think about all of this. There was, questions about what does a replacement mean, right? Does it mean erasing everything if it's all new, and how do we hold on to some of the heritage that is a lot of you hold. Athletic fields came up a few times about that also being a cultural place, that people love the blue track symbol for many things. So this idea of pride came up in the tour, came up throughout comments and topics. The existing building will remain as a monument to the past injustices this community has faced that needs to be properly considered. That also came up. This originally was, not exactly colonial, but it has a colonial past, the name of the school. How do we reconcile all of those things today? I think, and in the future of the school, is also something that I think people felt like needed to be talked about. And again, why we are changing the topics here today and the exercise to look like time for that. That might be a lot of people also had concerns about staying in the building at all. How can we get students out of these buildings sooner the better, with some of the reflections that came out last time. So I'm gonna try to go through this. We're gonna spend some time on the exercise that Kareem and Sandra is going to help lead us through. We have some fun things to cover, and then we'll go back and look at the program in more detail and just explain this ed spec and what it means, and all of the extra programs, the sort of the focus programs that's always been at Jefferson, or for a very long time been at Jefferson. How do they fit into the program, just so you all are more clear about that. Any questions? Thoughts before we just wanted to spend a couple of minutes just reflecting what we heard and how we're sort of changing the way that we look at this process, because we hear you, and we want to make this the right process. So, okay. One last question that came up last time is the schedule. So I'll let you.
Yes. So, yeah, this has come up, the questions about schedule, kind of where we are in the process, questions about kind of what sort of opportunities are there? Can we extend the period that we are right now? Also, some questions about what was the conceptual master plan process like. So I felt it was hard to kind of describe it without really kind of looking at kind of a really kind of a graphic calendar to try to put yourself where we are right now. So what this is it partly just starts with what we did in 2019 and then kind of shows in a similar way to what you've seen on Aura's schedule, kind of where we are right now. But it also adds beyond the planning and engagement timeline, what happens starting in 2023? Like what is the design and construction schedule? So starting with the 2019 conceptual master planning process, you can see again, a very kind of compressed process over a few months that was mostly focused on determining scope and schedule and cost estimate for the project. And overlaying that kind of with the broader process we're in right now, basically kind of April, May, June through the end of the year. And so I think it just, in my mind, it kind of helped to give you some sense of kind of the difference between the two, kind of how one was kind of a shorter, more compressed process, and now we're kind of in this more extended process. But also wanted to kind of highlight the goal here, which is the master planning report, which would be reviewed by the Board of Education. And that basically kind of leads us into what we begin early next year, which is the design, actually the construction process. Unfortunately, from this point forward, we don't yet have a detailed schedule. We're coming up with different scenarios that basically are based on the different planning scenarios. Like we did rebuild, what are all the different stages and steps that would happen both in design and permitting and construction and so forth. But what I can tell you at this point is that a lot of the process that's been happening in terms of engagement, CPC meetings, steering committee, town hall, and so forth, will continue into next year. The major change from your standpoint, obviously, is if you're interested, you can actually join the next phase, which is called the Design Advisory Group. So we switched from a comprehensive planning committee group to a design advisory group. So part of it is to let you know that this process really does continue. It's the end of your potential involvement. And so just wanted to kind of emphasize that, but also just kind of looking at there are kind of these fixed kind of timeframes for where we are right now, planning and engagement, and then design and construction. So I guess to answer the question more clearly, we are pretty much fixed in terms of where we formally end planning and where we have board approval, but we will continue with engagement past that. And there'll be a lot of opportunities for continued input and really influence on the project going forward. So again, this is in the email we sent out, so you can kind of look at it in more detail afterwards. Any questions about that? Yes.
So December is when this report needs to exist and be approved. I mean, it seems then like design occurs. So I'm curious what rigidity or flexibility is the result in this December? Like how specific do the terms need to be?
Essentially it's the basic kind of between the several scenarios that we're considering right now. It's partly just what is the preferred option amongst those scenarios. And then the design team will be developing using the program to kind of flesh out what exists in what part of the building. And then that gets reported along with kind of a summary of the program. There'll be kind of both a schedule information, cost information, but into 2023, you kind of you're at the very beginning of the design process. So I know on every project that we've done, every high school project, certainly, when you get into design, and with the design advisory group, it's a whole other set of conversations. So again, it's still that opportunity to have that impact going forward.
I think it's think of it this way, it is the placement and location on the overall site of where the buildings go, like just like the north, south, all those
Mhm.
options. Whether or not we're renovating the building or if it's an all new building, those would be the general ideas that we would want to understand by the end of this process. And then the specific parts of the school, we will know sort of the location where the main entry might be, but we will not know where this office or this exact kind of floor plan of the building at that point. But we might know like dance is over here or if performing arts is over here in this general area. We will know that classrooms is over here in this general area, but we would not know the details of all of that. And there's time to figure that out in the next year, in the next phase. So just keep that in mind. Yeah.
So if we do move into design at the beginning of calendar year 2023, is there a possibility that students could be in the building in fall of 25 or really fall of 26?
Yes, 26 is what we're targeting. Or sorry, yeah, 24 is the start of construction and 26 is to have at least some portion of occupancy. I'd say Lincoln is kind of an example of how you have a building ready to go, but at least a portion of the project is done. But then you're still working on the other site components and fields and demo and so forth.
So when you're talking about what's going to be like the shape of the buildings, is that something that's going to be determined, or
I think
I guess I'm confused about like
I would say it's not
what
that
falls into design.
far. I would say it's not that far in the shape of the buildings, but we would have a mass, so they would be a cube that's athletics. That's the gym and locker rooms, and another cube that's, the auxiliary gym, and a cube that is the theater or dance studios, and that can, maybe some other like rectangles that would be classrooms, right?
just think of them as blocks.
Yeah.
I think that this will also come to more clarity the next time we come to this meeting, which is CPC 5, where we'll bring some physical models that always helps people picture where all this goes. The last time we showed this plan, it was very abstract. And we know that, we understand that you guys can't really fully understand that. But next time we're gonna bring blocks that represent the amount in volume of the school and of the classrooms, of the theater, of all those components, and then you'll be able to move them around. And we have some ideas that we can share with you all that to get your reactions to. And that's kind of the level. I mean, we would be a little bit past that level of what we're doing next time, but by the report, but that's kind of where we're gonna be in general.
And that includes all of those, versions of those options that you saw before. So that means keeping the original building, potentially keeping the gym building, and then also building new buildings all around. So all of those things are in play. And in the next meeting, you'll be able to kind of move things around on the site, and sort of figure out for yourselves what feels right based on, we're gonna help you by saying like, okay, this is how close you can be to the edges. I think it'll be a really fun process, and it just makes it so much easier to really visualize what these things mean, and how we would be adding on to the existing building if we modernize it. So I think it'll make it a lot easier to kind of, I don't know, just get to a place where you get it and you can decide for yourself what you think really works.
And maybe what might help in between now and that next meeting, we can send out some photos of some of this that we've done before for another project, just so you can kind of picture it. That might help. In between.
Where in the process are the decisions made about which programs are going to be, or if it has already been decided, which programs, which spaces are going to be created for which programs? Can I form that too?
Yeah, it's a long answer to that question, and I will try to cover that in the second half. And so hold on to that thought, and we will get there. Any other?
Can I ask one more thing?
Yeah.
Can I just ask? We did some like identifying who was who in the room last time. Can I ask who was part of the CMPC, like the conceptual
original.
master planning? And maybe it was just helpful for me to get an idea of how many people repeat. Okay, thank you.
And then who's in the CPC? There are many people here. I think there's community advocates here as well. Do you want to raise your hands just so everybody knows who is
CDO.
CDOs, please raise your hand. Great. The rest of, are there any public, people, sort of folks here that are not part of the specific CPC? Okay, great. Good to know. Welcome.
I have a question that's sort of unrelated, but I just kind of want to throw it out there.
Okay.
And it has to do with the naming that went on yesterday. But it's also talking about the naming of Jefferson. The one thing that I just want to have in our notes here is they made a decision to go ahead and change the name because it was long overdue, rather than going through however they've now developed, or public schools has now developed this process. And I'm hoping they take that same consideration with Jefferson, because Matthew Prophet was one of our names for Jefferson prior to it being the BESC. So this is how long some of that work in community has been around. And I just want to kind of really let you all know there's been a lot of community invested in trying to come up with some of these decisions. And so when we alter them drastically between meetings, that throws people off. So I just kind of want you guys to know that. So when we have that person speaking here from PP, and I appreciate whatever new system they've now developed, but the name change is long overdue. So I just wanted to say that. And people are getting frustrated about just simple little things like that. So I just thought I'd say that out loud.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. Thank you.
Speaking of such.
Yeah.
So we need to start that process of.
Camille, if you, not to put you on the spot, there's, Camille works with Danny Ledesma, who is kind of the one that kind of presented that information. So part of it is we're going to get a written version of that we can share with you, because not everyone has. We don't want you to have to sit through watching that again. So if, I don't know, Camille, we've talked about kind of getting a written kind of document of that, just to give people a sense of where we are now, what the final steps are, and then how we kind of hand it off to.
I think what Liz was going to say, that we shouldn't have to. We've already been doing this process. Yeah. And it seems like every time this comes up, this squeeze through the new box we gotta fit in and hoop to jump through. But we shouldn't have to go through that process. Just like they established that policy before they voted on the name of the property. They didn't make them go through that process. Why make us go through that process? You already know, we already got the data and everything. We already been having discussions and stuff like that. We just need to have a committee that's decided what the name is going to be.
I will say that, having been part of the renaming processes, first of all, it's not that burdensome, like, with Leotis McDaniel and, Madison, it was totally driven by the community and it was pretty quick. So, it doesn't have to be that much of a labor. And then just the other thing I wanted to say is that with the decision last night, in the policy itself, and I know the whole point of what you're saying is that, like, we don't want to get wrapped up in the policies, but there's a big difference between naming administrative buildings and naming schools. So in terms of what's described as far as the number of steps, but I don't want anybody to think that it has to be a really burdensome, drawn out process. It's, if you get a bunch of community momentum and you have make sure you get plenty of community input, it can happen pretty efficiently. And that's what McDaniel. Yeah.
And I did listen to the meeting yesterday, and so even that, anything that the board decides to do, if I was listening to your meeting last night correctly, the board can sit and override it as well. So I'm just letting you know that community is paying attention.
Yeah.
So.
Have y'all taken a poll with the community that actually came from this area? That is original of this area?
Yeah.
I think they were prior. Yeah.
I went to Jefferson, but we didn't get to the, we never got the alumni. You know, it's people that went here that got this place.
Yeah, I'm
So that was just.
I graduated here.
And I graduated in '70.
Yeah, well, I'm from the 90s era, a lot of us got this place to get out of school, so
We talked with some of those people.
that's why I was there.
Yeah, we did. We talked to, I mean, there's been different groups talking to different groups, hopefully trying to catch all the age groups. But I'm also a former teacher too, so I've talked to kids from every or young people.
We talked to a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm just a big part.
I have a question and a concern a little bit. Is there any concern that we would name it after an individual like they did Jefferson and all the rest of schools? Only to find out that that human being didn't leave the cellar like that we thought they did. And then do we go back and do we have to change it again because something else?
But after we all go things up before you select.
Right.
You don't select nobody.
That you know of.
Huh?
That you know that they, if we know that they have that background, if we find out later they have that background. Yeah, we like to see it. Right? Yeah, something.
If I look at the names that have already gone, some representation of people, we could find in Madison, with someone who was local to the community. But there's a lot of people to consider, and I don't doubt that. And I just remember somebody mentioning to me of that maybe we hadn't talked to kids, and I just wanted to let people know that there have been youth that have been talked to as well. And no, I know, I know. But I mean, just through I guess what I'm trying to say about that whole process, if we've been doing this on and off I've been back home for 25 years. We've been doing it for, having that conversation for at least 25 years I've been done. So I don't know if it's a thing of having to go through that whole process again. Or just maybe looking at the names we have, if people agree, don't agree, or have another name they want to add, but just shortening the process so it kind of goes along with the building of the school. It just happens instead of it constantly being drug out and coming out in 6 months or a year that we got to start all over. That's how it felt when I was at that last meeting. Like there's all this stuff that we're starting all over.
The school board was at the Portland Library, with KGW and everybody else. And we had that meeting. That principal. One of the change they back then there, they were not cool. Alumni wanted to keep it the same. And the students waited.
Right.
The current students, that's what I was thinking. And they said they want to see a name change, but they put that on hold. But right now they need to get rid of the rap and have clean drink.
My question was there. But I'm the 90s kid, and we get shut out. I'm here. I didn't know I got invited here, so I've never even heard of the names nor any of this stuff going on. And nobody in my age are talking about it. And I feel like we're the parents of a lot of these students that's been in here. And so I hear that y'all making a lot of changes. It's kind of alarming for a person like
And I can respect it. Yeah.
So
Maybe there's a way to document some of the work that you have done and, we could help you. Oh, great. So to have that, to be able to share with people what's been done and then,
And hand that over.
Even Facebook.
have another meeting, right? So that all the kids from the 90s can come in and we make sure that we are connecting with anyone who hasn't been part of this conversation before. That'd be great.
I wonder if the video we could talk with him specifically and make sure that that's done.
Yeah.
As just a.
I definitely think that's probably one of the most important demographics that nobody talks about. That could be part of the movement of gang violence, we're the ones who represent that. The bad part of what people talk about changing. And a lot of us, I feel like, got shafted. So we have no say so in none of the future plans for.
Actually, a lot of midnight.
I I'm not a part of the school system, so I wouldn't be able to. Like that with the school.
Who wants me to get that information?
I'd say something.
Oh,
If I may. Hi, everybody. I'm Camille. Camille, I've got to see her pronouns. I work with Portland Public Schools Assistant Office, and I lead what is called the Innovation Studio. One of the things that we're also working on is the Center for Black Student Excellence, which is right now just a concept. What we know we want to be true is we want to drastically shift the experience for Black students, particularly in this geographic area. So Albina, Jefferson, Tubman, and the elementary feeder schools in this area. Now, we have an opportunity, and I'm just going to name that here, that there is a capital project that's happening. That's why many of you are here. And alongside this capital project is our opportunity to shape what happens inside of the building, right? Shape the culture and the narrative and the sense of belonging for students, particularly focusing on Black students who have historically been pushed out, displaced, and all of those things. And so I just want to name here that the project team and myself, we've been working pretty closely. I want to honor that there is a timeline for the rebuild of the school from a built environment perspective. And very, very quickly, I'm not sure if y'all watched the board meeting last night, but very quickly, you will also hear some opportunities about how you can participate in the conversation to shape what's happening in the forums. And not just at Jefferson, but at Tubman and the feeders, so that we can create a continuous experience for our students. And I also want to be really explicit that we are intentionally naming and centering Black students. That doesn't mean that we don't care about other demographic groups at all. That's not what that means. But we're just focusing our efforts. So I know I'm sitting here and I'm listening and I'm absorbing, and I just want you all to know that there's another avenue to address what happens in the four walls. So I'll just leave them there. Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of roll into it and kind of switch gears about a question about covenant. There has been conversation, and modernization talked about putting Tubman on the person's campus, and then I was told no because it's not enough acreage. And then there was like this article within the last couple of days that mentioned it again. So I'm like, where are we with that? A lot of people are really upset about it because they feel like they're, it's gonna take away, like, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm just wondering, where are we with that? What is happening?
No decisions have been made. None. The media will always do what the media does and take information in bits and pieces and create a narrative. That decision has not been made. We have based on the previous process that was set up for the relocation, there are a couple of options that are on the table, but now we're having a larger conversation, which will potentially bring us more options. But no decisions have been made to co-locate Tubman and Jefferson.
That is a possibility still, because there's a lot of people upset about it. I guess that's my clarification. Is it still on the table as a possibility?
is it a long-term possibility or is it a short-term possibility?
No, long term.
You can create comprehensive title.
You want me to help you out?
Go for it. That decision just has not been made. It just hasn't.
It hasn't, but I will say, so part of where that came from is looking at the piece of property on the south side of Alberta. But I will say, as you guys know from this process, there are what we call ed specs, educational specifications for the high school and for Tubman and for middle school that lay out how much space is required for the program that has to take place there. And there is not enough space for the program that needs to be here for Jefferson High School, a comprehensive high school, and the program that would be needed for full middle school. So, okay.
I'm certainly glad to hear that, because that was my next question. Plus, there was just some conversation in terms of Tubman too. Or even, we never replaced Adams as a middle school. So really, in this catchment, there's 2 middle schools due. And I mean, that to me, to pile them on and add that onto the Jefferson thing, could be another whole reason. So that's where it didn't seem functional to me to even think about it like that. Plus, we just don't have the land next to it.
So can I ask a couple questions? I'm gonna ask a couple questions. See what happens with that. So I had a little bit of a conversation earlier today about whether or not Jefferson is a neighborhood school, a community school, a cultural school, like, and the difference between all of those. I think that's important to kind of suss out because as we think about traditions we are trying to maintain and hold on to, what heritage we're trying to hold on to within the space, and what cultures we're trying to hold on to within the space, having a clear definition of those things, what communities, what, like, if you just say community, what does that mean? Right? That everybody in this room is a part of multiple communities, right? So let's like try to kind of narrow some of that down and understand truly in this place for our people, like what does it mean to maintain culture in this building or the next building? What does it mean for our culture to be resonant in this space? I'll ask the question I asked a little earlier, which is in 20 years, we look back on the headline and we say, this school has been successful because it is a cultural institution. What did it do? What did it do to make sure that it was a cultural institution and preserved the culture that is currently here, that has been here, and the traditions that have been here over time? Oh, man. Oh, yeah. All right. I can answer. I didn't want to, but I'm good. Love it. All right. So I went to Tubman. I came from Tubman too. Well, I went to Wilson as well, but I came to Tubman here. We don't have a culture as far as this area. We've been this place since 1999. Lost this area. This area has been pretty much bought up and gentrified since 1999. But it started in 1995. We watched the first people come in who were not of the community. I don't think on my personal opinion, it just looks like they're revamping it for the community that's here now to save face for what was destroyed before. And now in 20 years, if I'm able to speak in 20 years about it, that's what I would say. I would be like, well, no, they destroyed the community that was here. And then they want to change everything around to make it feel good for who's here. You know, their kids feel good going here and living amongst this. But that breaks down to the economic breakdown outside of this place right now. If you want to give a safe space for people, I see they put a lot of money into rebuilding these schools, but no money into replacing the residents who came from this area. They had a program for the residents to get back, and I think it was for something like a few hundred people, and I think like home for it, like 30 people, like so many people got right, and then we never got back, and so. I see them dealing with these situations, but I don't see nobody speaking up to get the families that came from here back in. Like I said, my son, I wouldn't feel comfortable personally bringing my son back to school, especially if they renamed it, because I would feel like, okay, they just went to my school, renamed it. It's a whole new place now. It has nothing to do with the person I am, or what we grew up with. Regardless on what the guilt people feel about who Thomas Jefferson was, not my problem. I still went to Jefferson High School. I will always be a Democrat. I will always be a Demo as far as that goes. You know what I mean? So I don't just think it's a safe face program. I don't really see it as anything else.
But there are being that necessarily totally but there was reason why basically finished. We have a lot of books down back in.
the beginning promise that never got fulfilled. So we're
So that's being built by us.
that being
These
built.
are our eyes. It's us. Outliners, vision trust. That's us. You know, so, and then, what they're doing with Williams and Russell. That's us. So if there are things that happen, there'll be a whole lot of difference by just. May not look very bright right now, but if you understand all the feels of the emotion.
So,
Matt, so to,
no, go, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
so to take that, how do we stop that? How do we stop what you don't like and bring that back into Jeff?
I would think
How do we preserve our culture here?
the conversation has to be brought to people. I don't think enough people in the community that really came to that conversation. I hear y'all saying y'all talk to people, but I deal with these people every day. I ain't going to be in my friends. I grew up with the kids, you know what I mean? So I go to their houses and hang out regularly. This is a conversation we have amongst each other that we don't even feel safe, and that we don't even want to be in this neighborhood. We let alone walk around it. I walked through yesterday, I almost started crying. I lost some people in tears. I was just like, oh, we lost ours. I don't live here. We don't have a neighborhood. But I don't think that the information is out there as much as maybe you think it, people think it is. I think that the information has to be a lot more accessible for us. You know what I mean? When you see people over these parents, these kids are being bussed in. A lot of kids are being brought from the numbers. Like they're bringing their kids over to go to school because we have a sense of this is our school still. We can't live here, but we still send our kids to school over here. Same thing with Tubman and Boise. His kids can they get up at 6 in the morning, they come over here to school, but they don't know how to get home over here. They don't know how to get back to the community. We hear about these things in the media, as you say, they spin, but when you're really reaching out to these communities to get them back over here.
I built in a complex right next to me, it's a large complex. All the people dealing with it.
I'm glad you said that because we don't want to live in complexes. We want our house.
Well, they got homes, they're building homes.
Can I?
That's a process that can't be explained inside the 10 minutes.
Well, that's where I was gonna go with it. You're talking about 3 or 4 different groups and organizations, and I hear every word that you're saying because you're letting me know that PCRI and some of these other agencies are not getting the information out where it needs to be gotten to forward from where you are. Do know that there are people in the community and outside of the community that are having those conversations. And so it would be helpful if you let us know what is the best way to access where you are, your group, and just kind of set that situation up because it can happen. That's like not a problem. I am another one that's a firm believer in, the affordable housing that's been around here that I've seen, and I still live kind of in the community. I mean, Concordia, a couple of neighborhoods over, but I'm still here. So I fought to stay here and I ain't leaving. I tell people that all the time. You'll drag me up out of here. Okay? Because I put it. 2 generations in here. But
I don't think people realize that or as really have people who would have carried on the tradition of buying homes.
and I absolutely agree. And there's people out there carrying that message as well. It's just why we're not getting that information out to you. I'm not exactly sure. We need to figure that out because we need to hear from all places. I totally agree. And I don't believe in affordable housing to me is not a part. So that's a big problem in this nation.
So
Trying to get people back.
a couple of things.
I was just gonna say, but doesn't money always talk? When you talk about affordable housing, there's always something that's gonna be a little bit more. We see it every single day. To try to get people back here, it almost has to be affordable housing, and nobody wants to be in the league with big hierarchy.
And I was gonna say, so you also have the group of people that's not refusing to come back because it's not housing, it's apartments, thus far. And that conversation is being heard as well. That's a tougher conversation to have, and property is expensive. So just know that those conversations are being had and trying to figure out how to really open up and be able to get our community, fight for our community. The Center for Black Excellence, I'm hoping and praying that that's a role that they will play in this whole thing. But it's going to take time. It's not anything that's going to change over in a year. What I do want to say about the high school piece, Jefferson started as a comprehensive high school, which means it could hold, the potential is it would hold 1,700 students. Okay. That's what I think it should be brought. That's what I think personally it should be brought back to, as opposed to focus option this or, and even in the design of the dance school, when they first came up with the design to make it the School of the Arts, it was supposed to be a focused program that was in a comprehensive high school. It was not to take away from the rest of the high school or any of the other students. But over the years, that's exactly what happened as kids kept getting pushed out and the catchment area kept changing. Another issue that we have is the catchment for Jefferson is probably the oddest one of any other catchment in the city about how they keep our kids. You know, because I've worked as a teacher in this district. So we've got, I mean, like there's so many little pieces that we have to work on to reform and fix that no one answer is going to be to it, but everybody learning how to speak in one voice will be able to help get some of these problems done.
So that was the longest headline. No, it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. But I would love to hear if other folks have just kind of, again, that dream of when we look back. So what I heard out of this is that there has to be a direct correlation and connection between this school and the physical neighborhood, the surrounding housing and community. Because it's not just housing, right? It's food, it's cultural centers, it's all those other things that make a neighborhood what it needs to be. It can't just be housing. It's another reason that we get pushed out. It's only about the economic viability of someone's footprint or lot, right? So from a headline perspective, is there anybody else who thinks that, 20 years down the line, what do we do right?
We really listen to the community.
I think if you looked at the demographic of, to your point, of Black students that go here right now, and then trace back to the 90s and look at all those different areas, and we looked at that percentage, we should have a higher percentage of Black students going here 20 years from now. And we should have programs that are giving them opportunities to create economic development for themselves so that they can choose, like you said. If you have economics as Black people, you can choose to live wherever you want. You need to be able to buy homes, to your point. You don't want to always rent because you can always be pushed. But to your point, there's steps that we have to take to get there. And I think we all know society set everything up to not create that, right? Like 20 years from now, if this works out, there's a higher percentage of Black students going here. There's more opportunities for them to get the best educations. And there's more opportunities for them to actually understand how to create like income in various ways. And I think that's a lot of times what people, especially from Black communities, are not taught. We don't understand naturally business. And I think like if Jefferson could become that staple where you graduate from Jefferson and you comprehensively understand how to start a business, how to run a business, how to employ people, how to employ your own people, that will be a good headline 20 years from now. But you have to look at where we are right now and like focus on how do we get there? Like just percentages, a simple percentage, have a larger percentage in 20 years.
So 20 years, breaking news, Jefferson is a thriving Black cultural facility that has increased the economic well-being of Black population.
Well, she mentioned about the leadership. That's one of the things that made Jefferson strong in the first. I hear the word feeder schools, but I don't think we have them. Feeder schools meant one thing. You get out of that school, you went to go. We don't have feeder schools. Opry Green was a feeder school. Boise Hill is the Boise school was a feeder school. I went to Boise. I learned how to play trumpet in the 5th grade. By the time I graduated, I went straight to the band. The band was strong because of the feeder schools. If you want to make it sound like we've done what we needed to do and look at it 20 years from now, we've developed a system where we have feeder schools.
Headline, we have developed a feeder system that goes to the most thriving Black cultural institution in the world.
Yeah.
Great.
Also a stronger infrastructure. So one of the things that our community lacks right now is an infrastructure on pretty much many levels, not only economically, but we're talking about education. So we lack in education. So also here at Jeff, we would also need Black teachers and specifically Black male teachers also. So, I mean, you're taught so much through Black men and there's something about having strong Black men as your mentors and teachers and so on and so forth to help you make it economically, educationally, to to have feeder schools, and so on and so forth.
Do Hispanics get pushed out in this scenario? I don't know.
But this is the thing, like, let's talk about what that headline looks like.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we say it all.
Been here for a while.
Yeah.
Was here for a long time, and I would like to see us included in this.
Yeah.
Conversation.
Perfect. So
I'm gonna extend that because when you still look at the populations of the elementary schools here, there is a high Latino Hispanic population, there's a high Asian population, and specifically Vietnamese, and it goes to the Southeast Asian kind of countries. So there is that consideration to think about too. There's always a way to center. You know, actually, if you center, this is what I read somewhere, and I can't remember where I read it. If you center Black men, everybody else will get it. If you really make that investment. So 20 years from now, we have a city that really invests, continues to invest in this particular school, in this particular project, in a way that serves the community. So those jobs will be out there. People will be self-employed if they want to be self-employed, but there's jobs in the community. And we're buying from one another. You know, I work with art groups. You know, we're trying to figure out how we can get people to buy our art. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. That whole thinking, the whole community, the teaching needs to be also cultural community educators. There's a certain amount of your learning that's traditional learning. It's not learned absolutely everywhere in the school. Some things are brought to the school as extra programming that I know that you had in the 90s because I was there. But you know, but the divestment, the divestment from really supporting community, being a part and being engaged. What I hear him saying is we've lost engagement.
yeah,
We have a community that really doesn't engage the community that we claim we're trying to get back.
Yeah, I hear that.
So 20 years from now,
Yeah, 20 years from now,
be engaged.
we're engaged. But I want to go back to this other one real quick. So 20 years from now, we are engaged. We got that one. 20 years from now, we have a extremely strong Latino Hispanic community within the school that is
Multicultural.
multicultural. Okay. Okay. So it becomes a multicultural institution. Yeah. So just as a
So I'm all for everybody. I'm relationship down about that anybody. But the number one people who were displaced was us. So it's cool for you to, fight for your people. But we need to fight for ours. And sometimes we gotta start like not really worrying about other people. Because our people are we're the ones involved.
Minor in Vancouver and integration.
They're getting impression they were out people. But we never got here to get that area. We got here. Vancouver was flooded. So you have to also do the history of the albino community. They put I-5 in local all Black homes in the World Coliseum. This place all the Black people promised them homes, promised them everything. They put that hospital over there, they put these things over there, they moved generations of families got it. So like other people, so if you can't get that city, you have to understand if you're a Vanport person, you know that was a Black place, right? So you just were part of that situation. You guys are still here.
Yeah, that's what happened. Yeah. Jefferson was never a black school. It's not one now. It never will. But forgive me, people, yes. But they're the ones that caused it black because it was predominantly black. And so, and the feeling of those days was that anything black was bad. The neighborhood,
That's the feeling.
black.
Those days.
That's what redlining was all about. They didn't want you to, if you black, you're a doctor, you move into a neighborhood, you're black, they'll pay you to move out. You know, because you're black to white people. Then there goes the neighborhood, you know. So Paul Knowles, everybody heard of him. He was watching commercial one day and they were showing about some havoc that was going on at high school. And they showed all these police cars going through the neighborhood. And it wasn't Jefferson High School, but guess what was seen on the TV news? Jefferson High School, and back there, police cars going by. But it was about another school. So that's the way they do that. They always try to make black look bad. That's the reason why it's a black thing. You know, you get the black thing right, everybody else.
So I think part of this is I think we talked about this during our design justice training a few weeks back, is that when we talk about systems are created by way of kind of racialized bias versus a cultural inclination or a cultural influence. So racialized biases are a byproduct of whiteness. Whiteness then says that blackness is the antithetical to that. And so nothing goes below that relative to a white supremacist system, right? And so everything else is consuming when you take care of those who have been marginalized to the furthest extent, right? And then from what you also hear in this room and a lot of other rooms, when you hear the word black coming from black mouths, we are often talking about our culture and not the kind of racialized. Sometimes we're talking about the racialized systems, but oftentimes when we're talking about joy and resilience and all of that stuff, there's like a cultural expression that you hear, see, and feel, which other cultural communities have as well. And so if we lean into the moments where those things collide and are strong, then maybe we have a space that both acknowledges all of that history and supports other cultures within the context of that.
Yeah, I got a perfect example for anybody who's been around here. You guys look at the SEI Center. The SEI Center was built to prepare young black kids for gang violence in the 90s. That was for it. It was actually a program that started at Tubman. And what actually happened is when people got in, when they came in with the money, they built that center on top of a park, which that was the park I played in all that. You know, 3 months over. Once they became what they became and they got all the sponsors from these, none of the black kids who were supposed to go there needed that program, got that program. So if you look right now, the kids who are graduating from there, they're not the at-risk kids that program is designed for. The people who are graduating now are the kids whose families have the money to get their kids into that program and keep that program going. So that's what this is looking like. This will be 20 years. So that's the headline. That's probably what it's looking like. SEI Part 2.
Okay, that's a bad headline.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the good one? How do we stop? No, I know that's the path that you feel, but
that's
like
what it looks like. I'm just saying I was there for the beginning of SEI.
Yeah.
So I've seen it.
Correct.
Yeah.
How do you fix that? That's
What is the positive side? How does it look? Give us the 20-year positive.
I'm telling you, you have to get to the community that was here. It's not just me. There's other people that were here prior, there's people prior to me here, but they're not at all tapped on the shoulder and say, hey, luckily I've had somebody tap me and say, hey, you might want to come and see if you happen to hang up with how things are going, you come and see what's going on yourself. If you look, I brought my cousin with me. He graduated from here in 2000. What year you graduated, cousin? No. 09. So he graduated from here in 08. So, but we also don't live in the community. Also not from the community no more. This is not our community. We can't walk around here and go. We've lost pretty much every single house in the community. I think I got one cousin that has a house in this community right now. We all came from this community. So from the FRs.
Yeah.
The bars.
Yeah. You got a question right here?
Yeah.
I just wanted to share that I was at the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. School last night,
and they hadn't, they were talking about funds from FDI and what they're doing with the money. They were talking about how they were allocating funds to and the amount of families that they were supporting in youth work, and that they were paying, and they were not. I wish they would have broken down more, but what they were sharing is that they were funding rent and utility bills, and paying for medical bills, and paying for the schools that our kids go through. They were paying for so much, which was so wonderful. They needed more funds, and so then the school is coming together right now to talk about how we can raise more money to support those families that are part of the King Elementary community. It was great to see how much passion is there to help the families that are in the King neighborhood. And that was through the SEI that program. I didn't know, since you said you kind of been part of it, I wanted to share that was being shared last night.
We get two more headlines. Go ahead.
I'm gonna try to loop to a headline.
Come on.
There's a lot of stuff happening. I just wanted to, I mean, you brought up kind of the race lenses. I mean, it starts to become, that's how oppression works when we're like, well, what about my people? And something that as this conversation was evolving, one of my mentors came up in this community, Kent Ford, former Black Panther, founded the Portland Black Panthers, was handing out the free breakfast, all that stuff. And he turned me on to Fred Hampton, who was the founder of the Rainbow Coalition. And that group of people of all different young lords, young Puerto Ricans, Red Star, Asian Americans, AIM, Indigenous, Brown Beret, everyone was represented over there. And that was the community organizing to get its needs met despite a literally murderous government, right? And so something that I am feeling sort of in this moment is that for the first time in these conversations, the community is actually having a conversation about what it actually needs to happen. And so when you first asked the question, you're like, what are the headlines? I was trying to think, because here we already had like this intergenerational kind of back and forth. And I feel like maybe it's like Jefferson doesn't lose its connection to its roots, because not only is this where the information is being retained, but there's also that trauma that has taken place that is still underway. And the healing to that trauma is going to be the intergenerational connection to actually pave the way for the future. But it is not just the school. We talked about the feeders, we talked about the middle, talked about the elementary, and those things remain in unrest. And I think like another interesting King example is I was around last year, around the protest around Tubman moving to King. I was around right around that time is when Lunar New Year was. And so they have like a Lunar New Year festival. It was pretty badass. Like kids were doing flag exercises and speaking Chinese. And it was real interesting because like when the step team came up and the African drumming, I noticed so clearly that the facilitators of those were like, oh yeah, like we only get like 15 minutes a day. Like we're still practicing, right? And so what we're seeing there is a multicultural experience. However, what we're also seeing is there's not an equal investment in particularly the Black experience. And so that is why I think this conversation is happening the way that it's happening, is because not only has that community been removed, but we are symbolically doing kind of stuff to say that we're preserving culture and heritage, and it doesn't feel good to those who are navigating that experience. So here we are for the first time, maybe really getting to talk about it. And if we're talking about the 20-year version, it needs to be a systemic investment in this entire region. It means people returning, it means people having houses, and it means people be able to go K through 12 without taking 5 buses and whatever. So if that could become a headline, I'm all about it.
That's a hell of a headline. We got that on record somewhere. Somebody.
Yeah.
Good. Yes. So Mary.
Well, I just want to appreciate all of this conversation, making it open and walk away from the agenda into what I think is the real conversation. And I've just been thinking about 20 years from now, the headlines some sort of, piece that's about Killingsworth is shut down as the community celebrates 10 years of 100% Black student graduation.
Man.
Woo! Love it.
Okay.
And just trying to, I just
Yeah.
appreciate all of the real stories that you all are sharing here. And so I was trying to encompass, if the community is healed, if the community is wrapped around and people are able to come back as they choose and they want to, if Jefferson is still the center and the place where community can come, and the education of our children is 100% graduation, 100% graduation of African American students. And let me be clear, I am a proud Asian woman. I raised my family in those ways, and I understand. I really appreciate what you said, Liz, that when the Black community thrives, the rest of us can thrive as well. So there's just a lot of trying to reflect on the wholeness and the healing of the community has to happen for that 100% graduation to happen. Like there's this virtuous circle or cycle that has to happen. The building's gotta be there for the children and the families in the community. The children and the community gotta be there for the building in this moment. None of it's gonna survive and none of it's gonna thrive by itself. And it absolutely can and will thrive when it comes together, right? Where there's this holistic piece of it that includes all of us. You know, it's I think it is possible. And so I was thinking about that 20-year headline of the streets shut down for a 3-day celebration where the community is, the graduates are marching down the street and the community's there loving on them and then they're walking home, not busting away to them. They're walking to their houses afterwards and there's picnics and barbecues in the community, all of that kind of stuff. So we're celebrating 10 solid years of 100% graduation rate of African American students from this school.
Into it.
Yeah.
I teach social studies here at DEP, and just some of the things, like thinking about the stories that I hear students telling today, sound very much like what you're talking about. Their connection. But having also heard from people like this exchange between the groups is also really beautiful, like that intergenerational exchange. And thinking about like in 20 years in the future, just wanting like that these stories and these histories are not like fragmented, right? That we come into these spaces and we know them. And that I would say like my domain and world really is like, students and teachers is kind of like where I'm at every day, but thinking about how students and teachers and staff and everybody in the building, like that we know how to hear our histories, we know how to hold the histories, and we know how to communicate the histories so that the community is also a part of that, right? So it's like we're constantly carrying it torch, but it's also alive. It's not only living in the past and it's not only living right now, but it's like it's this whole rich experience that they have. Yeah.
I'll reflect on that briefly. And, if anyone else wants to jump in, but I'll use my louder voice. That came up a little bit earlier today in some conversations that we were having with some folks with Latino Network and some other folks who are part of the staff here or part of the community, Latino and Hispanic community around Jeff, who also brought up like Black and Latino solidarity is necessary for us all to thrive, right? Like fragmentation and pitting communities against each other is how systems of oppression also perpetuate themselves. And the organizing that some folks in the Latino community have had to do just to be able to have classrooms where they could have Spanish language in the classroom, right? Which didn't exist. Or the fact that there is a significant Dominican population at this school that spans that, they are Black and Latino, right? Communities are not binary in that way. And the sort of scarcity mentality of like, if you're thriving, then we can't thrive. If you're thriving, then we can't thrive, isn't actually a necessity if there's organizing together to make sure that the resources are available to everyone that is systematically oppressed in the system. But centering Blackness for all the reasons that have been stated is necessary I think I also want to just reflect on the opportunity for this project and process to be a learning experience. Like the learning that you're talking about, that carrying that flame, like this was not on the agenda tonight. You know, this conversation as it is happening was not on the agenda tonight, but this is a learning experience, is a pedagogic space. And in the same way that sustainability, like designing a sustainable building, an environmentally friendly building, or more than friendly, but a building that strives towards climate justice, is a learning experience and opportunity for youth who are going through this school as it happens. Like, how does this, all of this knowledge and learning take place within that process of creating the future, the future of this school, this institution, so that it doesn't just get lost, and so that those different generations and communities are connecting on. So
There's some healing. Healing. About healing that the African American. We just had a major healing last night. When I was saying something about PPS, it wasn't PPS, it was Richard Blanchard.
They can take it, Richard. They fine. This will be fine.
You know, so it's not about PPS, it's about who's running PPS at the time. And that's Richard Blanchard, and I was my fourth cylinder before me, and then me, we used to walk in 5 blocks to Jefferson High School. Blanchard decided that no more. And my 2 younger brothers had to be bused out to Washington. They couldn't walk 5 blocks. So that was part of a dismantling. And so that that's always happened in the Black community, healing from that. And so I'm so glad that it's what is a good thing that happened for Black people? It's a good thing that happened for everybody. Okay, because Black people birth is still right. Now it's benefiting everybody. But you know.
Straight up. That's not just us. We have been shut out of that. Absolutely. I do want to say something. I don't think people are taking into consideration when I keep talking about the 90s and 80s. If you walk through this school just right now, you've seen all the pictures of the kids from the 70s, and I was seeing you can see nothing from the kids from the 80s and the 90s up there. There's a reason for that. In that time, I would hope that y'all would go do some homework on what was happening over here in the 80s and the 90s and how they actually set us up for failure to make this neighborhood what it is. A lot of this is a pre-planned situation. It was very diabolical by the people who were in power at the time. So a lot of us that understand now what happened to us, we can't fix it. We can't take back 20 years of being beat down by a system that we didn't realize was beating us down, and we were playing along, right? We thought we were doing good. Yeah. And then we woke up one day and we realized we were tricked out of our homes. We were tricked out of our I have a friend who bought a home over here on Sumner for $30,000 in 1998. My dad tried to buy the home right down here on Boardwalk Skidmore. He was told no, he can't buy it, that they weren't selling the house. And then he moved, he went to find another house, and what did he look up the next year? The house is sold. So this is the types of things that were going on. Also, when you were speaking on the Spanish community, we had a few Spanish people. I went to school over, so we had a few Spanish people here, but not a big, large population of Spanish kids. Also, we also had Spanish classes. I learned Spanish. We had Spanish classes at all our schools, so that wasn't, they just didn't have African teaching. They never taught us how to speak African. But then also MLK is 4 blocks that way. MLK represents Martin Luther King. That was an all Black street with a lot of Black businesses that they got rid of. They let those businesses fail. And then when they moved us out and before they boarded it up, when everybody else came in, they gave them what was called the facelift. They started paying the facelift for those people. We never got any of that. We've lost out on everything. So now we live in a place, we're very displaced out in the numbers where we didn't grow up at. We don't know the area. We don't know the streets. We don't know none of that stuff. And you try to walk to the school in numbers, try that if you want to. You'll be walking for 3 days. You might not never make it to school out there. And so just if you got, I would just ask y'all to please consider the 80s and the 90s in this area and look into the history of it. Because a lot of times we do talk about this place of Black people in the in the in the sixties and seventies from the which was probably the most thriving time in this area for black people, the sixties and seventies. Whatever happened, we talk about that, but they make sure to erase that nineties conversation. It's something that it's actually a thing on. It was a thing on OPB. They were check that having this girl help out get a lot of these black families out of here. And when they built up Mississippi, because also with the AYOS on Mississippi, and I remember specifically how they were doing the black owners over there with their businesses, where they would come and they would say, "Oh, you got a business, you're paying $1,100 rent. Well, tomorrow it'll be $2,200." So they were moving, they were jumping back and forth to other places to try to figure out where they were going to move their businesses to. And that's why we have no black businesses in Oregon, because how do you start a black business in a place where you never even lived at before? You don't even know the streets, the buildings, the people, know nothing. Nobody planned to move to the numbers. They got shipped out there. Now, the biggest, largest black community right here in Portland on this side of the water is in that building right there next to MLK. And if you guys drive past that, go drive past there at 4 o'clock in the morning. It looks like hell. Sorry, it's wrong. They didn't help the people. They just moved them into that building. And so you still have the same mentalities. You still have the same hurt situations. Those kids are the kids that you're starting to see come to these schools. And they're going to come with the same mentality. So if you don't fix, they don't make a honest fix on what's happened to the community on that level. Y'all, like I said, 20 years, you're going to look up. You might have SEI part 2. And that's why I was telling y'all that. So look at what happened in the 90s so you don't make the same mistake that the people in the 90s made. Because that's why y'all sitting here today. These same meetings that y'all having today were happening in the 90s. Were happening right there down on Mississippi and Shade on the corner of that building. It was happening all through here at the police department. And the police is a big part of what was happening. Nobody's,
So 3 things on that. One is, I don't know if y'all noticed, but anybody heard of CEPTED? Yeah. Crime Prevention through Environmental Design. So the kind of commercial corridors version of CEPTED was initiated here, right here in Vanport. 78 is when they started it. So this is really a way to over criminalize, to hyper profile and over criminalize black Americans. That was like the intention. That was the output of this. So going into the 80s, from 78 to 82, you still saw redlining pushing all the way to 82, 83, give or take. So again, decreasing the value of black homes, pushing black families out, increasing the values once white families got in there. And then the last thing I would say is a lot of the kind of slum clearance and urban renewal that happened out of the 60s, 70s, 80s was about consolidating black people into the specific spaces, destroying those buildings and clearing up for new. And then one more thing is from 81 to 89, Ronald Reagan essentially defunded HUD. So a lot of the ways in which reparative housing was happening for black people from the 70s to present was essentially demolished. 80% of all of that funding went away. And so we were left with no homes, no place to go, no new buildings coming to support us. And HUD is not just housing, but it's other kind of community and neighborhood endeavors. All of that stuff was wiped out. And so, yes, when you talk about the 80s and 90s, it's both the national consideration and then there's a hyper-specific way in which it lays itself out in any given community. Same thing happened in my communities in Jersey, right? So, not the same, but like different, same tools were being placed upon us. So yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
That was the bomb. That was the ultimate bomb that killed it off because it separated the youth from our older generation. Our older generation at probably about 94, 92, 93, 94 are scared of us.
Yeah.
Don't want to deal with us. They're like, nah, those kids are killing each other. This is not your same gang fight with a stick and a bat or whatever. Y'all, these kids is dying out here. I mean, the biggest, I think one of the scariest things when I first start coming outside was like, dang, well, I'll be dead by 14. So a lot of us live the heightened like, hurry up and grow up so you can leave. Hurry up and get out of here. Or, you know what? Take it all in and die as a young and try to die of mortar. So you got a lot of kids who still have that mentality because their fathers, and that's a big thing. The fathers were cut out of a lot of situations in these communities. And luckily I had my father. Luckily I did have my dad. My dad went here as well. dad graduated from this school. I never knew that for probably 20 years of my life. Never knew it. Lived down 4 blocks. The man never, when I came to school, he never came in here. I never knew my dad graduated from here. He never talked to. I never seen the man's diploma to this day. But it's the disconnection. He's like, you got to leave. You're with the guys who's outside doing all the bad stuff. You got to get out of my house. You're about to make it bad for me. So yeah, it's one rock on top of another. Every time you turn, like I'm 40 years old and I still haven't woke up out of the whirlwind. That's just the honest truth. So y'all see a lot of us walking around think that we have a lot of us are on the verge of losing our minds because we know we can't even give our children a proper future. And it seems like the only future we can tell them to go for is the future that's created by someone else now. To say, you guys got to accept this or you're not going to really get a future. So play along or don't. It's very hard. I think it's very hard. It's extremely hard. Nobody wants to, man, I don't know. No black people want to live in Portland. I don't. From what I'm hearing, like I said, from my generation, man, I know people rather live in Las Vegas than Nevada.
That's what, that matter of fact, that's what all of my cousins. They all moved to Vegas.
So if I'm not somebody who know my community,
My cousin just got out of Rikers and went straight to Vegas.
I know my community. We all run to Vegas.
We got one back here. Yeah.
Hello. So I was born and raised in Portland. I've been in Portland for 18 of my 19 years of life. Traveled outside of Portland a lot. But my family is from here. They've been here since 1898. Prior to that, actually, my great aunt's grandmother was here in 1906. So the first documented person from my family was in 1906. So my family's been here longer than Jeff. And I thought it was absolutely amazing to find that out. It was actually during the design justice training that I texted my aunt and I was like, hey, when was the first person from our family documented in Portland? And she told me, and I was like, that is the coolest thing in the world. That is so cool. And my dad grew up here, my grandmother grew up here, my great grandmother grew up here as well. So my dad was born in 84. So that's how old he is, that's how old I am. So my dad was here, my uncle was here, my grandmother was here. So I hear stories about what happened in the 80s and the 90s because my family was all here. They were all here. They experienced redlining. They experienced the KKK. They experienced all of it. So I love talking to them because they tell me about all the things that happened when they were growing up, when their kids were growing up. And then I get to experience what happened when I was growing up, how different it was from when my parents were growing up. But I think that nobody in my family went to jail. None of them. None of them. I find it so interesting. And then my uncle went to Grant, and he gets bashed on his dad for that all the time. But once they all heard that I wanted to come to jail, they all supported me. They all were just like, if that's what you want to do, go and do it. And they asked me about school every day, my entire freshman year. They asked me, how was school? How was school today? Did you make any friends today? How many friends today? They met my friends. And I think that culture is more than just the physical place. It's the people that inhabit the physical place. And it's not even just the people that inhabit the physical place, but the people that came before them that inhabit the physical place. I was raised to be who it is that I want to be. I was never raised to conform to certain expectations. I mean, I had expectations because, you know, I'm saying I have my own, I set my own expectations. But that is how I was taught. That is how I was raised to put forth the effort to set my own expectations for what I want to do and how I want to get to where I want to be. I have
So I start PCC next week. My entire plan is to go to PCC, then after that, go to PSU and get a degree in business administration and digital marketing management. That is what I want to do. That is what I've told my entire family I wanted to do. And they all support me in this entire endeavor. But I also know that there was a point in time where they didn't feel that they had support from anyone else. Because from my understanding, from what I've been told, gosh, when my dad was growing up, everybody knew everybody. There was no not knowing somebody here. There was no not knowing somebody. You could walk down like 4 blocks. If you was hungry, there was somebody there that would feed you, that always have food. But the way that I grew up, it was not like that. I couldn't walk 4 blocks and get something to eat. I had to find out where my family was and then go to their house and be like, hey, got any food? And that's how I grew up. And then that's not how my dad grew up. And I find it so interesting because my dad loves saying, oh my God, he loves saying that what we're doing now is what he did when he was young. And I'm like, no, it's not. It is, but it's not. Because we grew up in 2 completely different generations and we're separated. I'm sorry to say it, but we are separated. Like the way that I experience things, the way that he experiences things is while they are the same, they're not at the same time. So I think that what I want, and I actually, Amy knows this, I fought with the district for like 3 years to get banned back at Jeff. Senior year, back at Jeff. What happened? I graduated.
But you didn't do it just.
And then what happened? I'm back. Good. I'm back. I'm here every other day.
Yes.
You can ask anybody who works here every other day. Because band was something that I knew I needed. That got me through the 7th and the 8th grade, actually. It was something that I knew I needed. So it was just like the way that I thought about it was if I needed that, then other people probably do too. So when I went to the district, I wasn't just fighting for what I wanted, what I felt I needed. I fought for the advancement of people that look like me, even people that don't necessarily look like me. But I fought for my people, the people that don't feel like they have a voice. Because I had to learn the hard way. We do. We really do. But it's just ignored most of the time. And I've had several conversations with several high up district members. They don't listen to us. They don't. Like, I feel like my dad knew this, grandmother knew this, I know this, sister knows this, entire family knows that we don't get listened to. But I think that what needs to happen is that we need to realize that we have the voice. We have the voice to change what goes on around us, what goes on in our community, because a community is not a physical space, it's the people. So my community is not just my family, but a lot of the people in this room, because a lot of y'all know my family. Dang it. It's so hard to be part of my family and not be known by everybody. It's annoying too, but I love it because that is what the Black community was when my grandmother was growing up, when my father was growing up. And then I'm kind of put smack dab in the middle, and I'm confused because I was never taught that we all know each other. Everybody knows everybody. And it was incredibly scary when I learned that everybody knows everybody. Because I was just like, so I can't walk down the street without somebody being like, oh my God, you were so-and-so's kid, ain't you? And I'm like, yes. But that is what I've learned through conversations with my family, is that the Black community in Portland used to be so interconnected. Like it was a thing. And I was growing up, I was like, that is the coolest thing in the world. That is so cool how everybody's with everybody. Like, it's not like, hey, oh yeah, I know him from school. It was your parents knew each other. You hung out all the time. And you could just go to their house and just be like, hey, hi, and just hang out. We don't have that. I never grew up with that. I could go to my family's house. I could go to my aunt's house. I could go to my uncle's house. But that's because they were family. Like they were blood. But my dad growing up, they didn't have to be blood. They were still your family because of how interconnected the Black community was. And then gentrification happened. Yeah, we all know who that was. Yeah, that's how I grew up. And a lot of the families that my dad knew, a lot of the families that my grandmother knew, they don't live in this community because they were forced out. So I want to see Jeff become a place where everybody can gather, no matter how you look, no matter how you act, no matter what it is. And everybody's welcome and treated like they are a family.
So this is, the headline is that we're gonna, Jefferson is a way to reconnect families. I'm on task, y'all. Like, all right. But say, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. And it is 8:30. We want to respect your time. Does anybody want to close out, or PBS? No? All right, well then I'm gonna close out. Okay. Thank you for coming to this, but this can't be the only thing that we do, right? This can't be the only space that you're in. So if you have friends, family, connections outside of this room, go talk to them, bring that information back, talk with us about it. If we need to come and show up in your neighborhood, out in the numbers. I don't live in the numbers. Okay. Where you at? Oh, you're approved. Well, wherever we need to be. Okay, I hear you. Wherever we need to be, let's just make sure that we communicate it, because we have organizers on this team for that specific reason. It is a pleasure always to be in this room with all of you. So if you have any questions, we'll hang around for a little bit, but other than that, we'll close out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.